Hello, everyone. Hello, Tyler.
Hello, Ornella.
Welcome to our third Replit Creates workshop. I have with me today my very good friend Tyler, a designer at Replit, who's going to show us some really cool stuff. So I'm excited. And Tyler, you want to do a little intro?
Yeah. No, that was perfect. That's everything about who I am, the designer at Replit. Um, yeah, besides that, and besides my name, um,
And besides being my very good friend.
and besides being your very good friend, um, I've also done a fair amount of engineering before. I'm very into like art and simulating different like weird digital biological things. We can get into what specifically that means, but later. But yeah, there's a lot of really interesting stuff to be done around like simulating life. People talk about AI as this like very abstract thing. Artificial intelligence, like being able to solve different problems and use it in different apps throughout the day. But one of the things that we'll talk about, which is like the inspiration behind a lot of my interest in this, is a field called artificial life, which is like creating kind of digital organisms and like trying to simulate organic behavior um, using algorithms. So yeah, I guess that was more of an intro to the workshop
No,
than
that's okay.
about myself. But yeah, that's what's relevant for now, I think.
That's okay. A lot of people saw the title of this workshop and were like, what does that mean? And they'll just have to wait and find out.
They will have to wait and find out. Yeah. Okay, I guess we can just should we just jump into it?
Yeah, let's do it. So we'll be sharing a bunch of stuff on screen, and if you have any questions, pop them in the chat. I'll put them on the screen. I'll interrupt Tyler. We can chat about them. Super informal. So yeah, if you've got some thoughts, share with us, please. Tyler, are you ready to share that screen?
Yes. Let me just get something up real quick. I'm looking for a GIF, a particular GIF. Hopefully, chat is not frustrated with me. Okay,
Not yet.
not yet. One sec.
You have a grace period.
Oh, am I still streaming?
I haven't shared your screen yet.
Oh yeah. Okay, it's ready.
It's ready. Okay.
Cool. All right. So we're gonna start off with a little bit of inspiration and a little bit of background on why I'm doing this. So I'll show a few things at first. The first thing that I really like as a reference is birds flocking.
Mm.
And hopefully if the streaming is good enough, you can see this, big blob of birds kind of moving around, creating these really crazy birds. Really cool, right? So there's that. There's simulations like this, which is called Conway's Game of Life, where you see these little shapes emerging and changing over time.
Yeah, we had a creator actually make Conway's Game of Life in Replit for Replit Creates.
Amazing. Yeah. Well, we're going to do that today as well.
Awesome.
And one more thing I wanted to show is this is a creator that I really like, and some fun little weird digital creatures that they made. So all of these things might seem disconnected in some way, but the reason I'm showing the three of them is because they all kind of follow some fundamental concepts together. And one of those concepts is, let me get back to the birds, is the idea of focusing on the rules about a single cell or a single organism or a single agent.
Mm.
Typically, what's difficult about say, simulating a flock of birds, right, digitally, like if you're making a game or something, is you're like, how am I going to possibly program in all of the different movements for the entire group of birds at once, right? Like, where would you even start if you saw, like, if you wanted to say have a cloud of 100 or 200 birds in your game and you wanted them to move around organically, could you write a single function or a single script or something that controls all of the birds at once and defines all of the behavior? Probably not.
Because it's not just random, right? There's some rhyme and reason to it.
Exactly. Yeah. And specifically, like the rhyme and reason is the birds know about each other, right?
Hmm.
The birds can interact with each other. They know the position of the other birds around them, specifically like in their neighborhood, and they react and change behavior accordingly. This is a really good example because it's also one of the key examples on the P5 site. And like flocking itself is actually behavior that is relatively easy to simulate, given you use the proper techniques.
Interesting.
I'll link to everything afterwards, but this isn't a cellular automaton in particular, but this bird flocking and algorithms like this is a really good example of what's called agent-based modeling, which is highly related to cellular automata. And it's just the idea that you write your code from the perspective of one of the things in your system. So in the case of simulating a bunch of birds, you are writing the code from the perspective of a bird in your system.
Right.
Yeah, so what that means is basically like you have a bunch of birds on the screen, and the only rules that you care about are how the bird reacts to the other birds around it. You don't care about the group as a whole. And what that implies is that the behavior that you see and all of the movement and everything is like this emergent property of all of the birds together, rather than something that's programmed top down.
Very cool.
Yeah. So the reason that I brought this up at first is because it's like a really good example from real life. You see it all the time. In some ways, like, people like going about their daily lives. What's that intersection in Tokyo?
Oh, yeah.
Like the Shibuya
Crossing, yeah.
intersection. Oh, I put an intersection at Tokyo.
Yeah, Shibuya Crossing, this one.
Yeah. I wish this was a GIF, but like, you see these people walking around and you can see patterns, right, emerging, right? Some people are going to this building, they go to that building, but it's not like there's some master program. I mean, I guess unless you're extremely religious, there's no master program controlling all the behavior of all of them at once. They all have free will to some degree, right? So they can go out and live their daily lives, but the patterns come out afterwards.
Yeah, those are some good real world examples.
Yeah. I mean, all this stuff comes from the real world, right? It's only like once you put it onto a screen, it's like this very reduced version of it.
Yeah.
Cool. So, and I'll link to resources about agent-based modeling after this. But
yeah,
the reason,
in the description.
Cool. Yeah, the reason I brought this up with regard to cellular automata is because a cellular automata program basically follows the same principles. So what you're seeing here is a grid of cells. And the idea is that for any particular cell, which kind of looks like a pixel, the rules that you program into it, right? If you wanted to, say, change colors, right, from white to black or something, the rules that you write down, aka your algorithm, basically says for every single cell, look at the neighboring cells around it and look at what color is inside of them or what state is inside of them or whatever, and then change your color accordingly based on what's around that. So, you never program the entire board at once. You are just focusing on a particular cell.
So like one unit of something, whether that's the bird or the person in the crosswalk or whatever it is.
Exactly. Or, the cell in your grid, right? The cell in your grid, the person in the crosswalk, the bird in the flock. This is getting a little bit poetic, but they all kind of follow the same principle. Obviously the implementation details differ like very, very widely depending on like what technology you're using and how you actually want your simulation to play out, but that's the core of it. So we're going to hop over to Replit, and I have a few kind of demo simulations set up. And this is, for reference, a custom environment that I built for this workshop and like for demoing cellular automata in general. So before I jump straight in, I just want to explain a little bit about the code. I'll make it large so we can see everything.
Nice. That looks good.
Cool.
Let us know if it looks good for everyone.
Yes. Hopefully, I can't see chat right now, so let me know if anybody.
Yeah.
Cool.
We're good.
So,
Jesse says POG, so we're good.
POGs. Great. So what you're looking at is so if I just collapse this, you can ignore all this stuff for now. There's like a little setup function. We, decide the size of the grid, the frames per second we want, some other stuff. It's sort of inspired by P5 in terms of how the functions are set up and separated. But the main thing that you need to focus on is this one function called cell. And the idea here is that if you want to make an animation or an automaton or something, all you have to worry about is writing the code for one cell, right? You just write one function, and that function for every single cell in the grid gets applied to it. And depending on the rules inside of that function, it'll color the screen appropriately.
Interesting. It's kind of like recursion, ?
There's some conceptual similarities there in terms of like, you focus on, you focus basically on like one case, right?
Yeah.
Or kind of one entity, and it's, applied. It's applied over and over again, but this isn't, I guess this strictly is not recursive.
Yeah.
Just in terms of the implementation, but yes, conceptually it's very similar.
Interesting.
Cool. So the first and most basic demo that I have set up is basically just coloring in a single cell. So we can see this little blue dot, right? The pale blue dot, as Carl Sagan once said, it's just at the center of the solar system, right? Just hanging out there. That's Earth. In fact, I'll rename this to pale blue dot. Return pale blue dot. Nice. So what's actually happening here? So basically, since this function is applied to every single cell in the grid, right? And I have a grid size of 128 by 128. So I don't know how many that is total, but it's like 16,000 cells or something.
Lena's hitting us with fun facts in the chat. So the current fun fact is Earth is not at the center of the solar system.
That is a fun fact, and I do stand corrected. So thank you for the correction there.
We love the fun facts. Keep them coming, please.
Amazing. Cool. So basically, the first challenge is, can you get a single dot to appear on the grid? And if we think about it for a sec, since this function is applied to every single cell, then we basically just have to check, hey, if we want the centered one to be colored, we need to check if the current cell is the center one. And if it is, then we'll color it blue. So that's basically what's happening in the first if statement here. We just check if the current cell's x coordinate and the y coordinate are equal to the middle of the grid, right? So if we want it to be a little bit more semantic, we could do something like this, where we could say the center has an x and y of the grid size divided by 2, right? Because if it's divided by 2, then you'll end up in the middle of it. And then we can replace this with center.x and center.y. So hopefully, if I didn't mess this up, this should look the same. Cool.
We got our little dot.
Our little dot, right? So what else can we do on top of this, right? This is a very basic drawing example. So we can obviously increase the complexity bit by bit. From here, I'll just go straight actually into the, actually, you know what? I'll wait for Game of Life for a sec so we can see how it's implemented. But just to give some perspective in terms of like how the drawing logic actually works, let's say we removed the cell.y condition, right? So we're not checking if the y coordinate is in the center. What do you think will happen?
All of them will be blue.
Well, not all of them.
No, nothing will happen.
Well, let's see. Refresh. Oh, you get a straight line.
Oh, sorry, I misunderstood the question.
No, you're good. But why do you think this happened? We took away the y condition, right? And now we're just checking x.
Yeah, so like everything in the center of the x-axis
Yes.
is blue.
Yes. Exactly, yeah. So we can also, if we really want to test this out, right, we'll do center.x minus 10, right? We can see this entire line shifts over 10, same thing with plus. If we say wanted to color in the left side of the screen, right, instead of checking if it's equal to x, we would just say less than x. And now every cell whose x position is less than the center will get colored in. Right?
Nice.
So this doesn't have specifically to do with automata, right? Because cellular automata fundamentally is like you have a tiny cell and it reacts accordingly based on the things around it, or at least in some sort of automatic way. But this is just showing how basically the drawing mechanics of this program.
Yeah,
so
how we make things happen in the grid.
Exactly. How things happen. So
do something crazy in the grid.
You want to do something crazy?
I want to do something crazy.
Well, lucky for you, we can do random colors as well. If this works.
Oh.
Yeah. And let's increase the FPS a little bit. It's going at 2 frames per second. Let's bump it up to 60. Nice.
Ooh. Some nice rainbow static going on. Look at all those cells.
All those cells just hanging around. Anyway, this is not a pale blue dot anymore. Let's go back to the Game of Life example, just to explain sort of the actual automaton part of this. So I have a example of a Game of Life actually set up already. We can see it running, hopefully. Oh no. Something broken. Did I mess up?
We went too crazy in the grid.
We did go too crazy. See, this is some live debugging right now.
It's okay. We've had live debugging in every workshop. That's what it's all about.
Amazing. Yeah, this is just working. Don't know why. Great. I'll just try refreshing.
Do you use the pale blue dot anywhere in the Game of Life?
Not the blue dot specifically, but we can make Game of Life blue if we want.
Well, no, I was just wondering because I remember you changed the name.
Oh, no. I do not. There are supposed to be separate examples. Yeah. I don't know.
What kind of errors we working with over here?
I think it's like a saving issue, potentially. This is really touching my preference. I think it's another one. Here, let me just try to get it back up going. Let's see what's up here.
Has anyone else made the Game of Life before?
What do you mean?
Anyone in the chat? I'm not sure if Ray is here, but Ray is the creator who made the Game of Life for one of the creates prompts. I can't remember which prompt it was.
I think this might be a Replit issue, actually, which is
Oh no.
kind of an issue, because even my previous one. Wait. Let's see if. Oh, that was the wrong link. Let's see if this is working. Okay, interesting. So there's something wrong with the web preview right now in Replit. But
that's okay. Let's do it on there.
We can see this. So
okay, what's going on here?
So what's going on here? Obviously, you see a bunch of little things moving around, right? Some are going faster than others. Some you have some shapes that are stable that don't move around. You can see some shapes kind of like moving towards each other, combining with other ones, that kind of thing. And the interesting thing about this is that all this stuff, right, all this complexity, basically comes from like two if statements, right? Like 2 or 3 simple rules that are applied to every single cell in the grid, but the complexity comes from all of the cells actually interacting with each other rather than the rules being complex themselves.
So wait, do they all start as the same cell, or are there different types of cells?
Funny you ask. I really want this to work because it's significantly better if it's going on in Replit itself. But they all start off random. And I can show you that by showing you how I initialize everything. Okay, we're gonna do something a little bit risky, and we're gonna stop the REPL, and then we're gonna rerun it.
It actually works for me, so I don't think it's Replit.
Weird. It must just be me. I really don't know why it's not loading. Oh, nice.
You can try in a different browser window or something.
Yeah, let's see. It is still not working here. Okay, so I'm just gonna manually refresh a copy of this, and I'll share my entire screen because we do things live.
Don't worry, we have live tech support from Jesse, who says kill one in the shell.
Oh, nice.
We have Tech Panda Pro telling us to close the pane and run it again. We have a very supportive audience who just wants you to be happy.
Yeah.
Okay, let me know when you're ready for me to add that other screen to the stream.
Okay, cool. All right. It is. I think, was Jesse my tech support? Is it literally just kill one? Okay.
Yeah, I think so.
I did run it already, but okay. we are going to improvise.
I mean, worst case, I can also we can show my screen because it works on mine.
Yeah. Let me see. Okay. Can you see everything that I'm looking at?
Yeah.
Cool. So we see a big red screen, and that's because I set it up so that if there's an error in the rendering, it'll set up a, it'll show red. But I'll fix that right now. And this is what we're going to do.
Tyler, hide your notes app.
Oh, yeah. It's just some stuff.
What happens between you and your notes app is not for the live stream.
This is true. So you can see a very. I wonder what will happen if this happens. So I just want to show the starting state. So you can see, so it quickly flashes, right? But basically, at first, we initialize all of the cells to be either randomly alive or dead, white or black.
Okay. So like a nice static.
Right, yeah. And then from there, you use all of the data to calculate the next iterations of the actual program. So you start off randomly, and then the order emerges with the rules. So I just wanted to show what the actual rules are, kind of formally. Here's the Wikipedia. Basically, these are the rules. So any cell that's currently living with fewer than 2 neighbors dies. So basically, if it's alone on the grid, any cell with 2 or 3 live neighbors lives on. Any cell that's kind of covered by other living cells, so 3 or more, dies. And then any dead cell with exactly 3 live neighbors becomes a live cell. So these rules can kind of be summarized in a much simpler statement, which I'll show over here.
Just little if statements, right?
Yeah, exactly. So basically, I literally was looking at the Wikipedia for this, and I was like, okay, how can we actually convert this into what we want? Now, this is working already, hopefully, so I will. Nice. Let's just play it a little bit faster. Let's do 10 frames per second. So you can see all those rules are being applied in tandem, right, at once.
To each cell.
To each cell, yeah. So we can see some like live examples of it, right? So this is a cluster of 4 cells, so 1, 2, 3, 4. If the cell is currently alive and it has exactly 3 neighbors, right? So that's this case. If the cell is alive and the neighbor count is 3, then it will stay alive. So that's being applied to all 4 of these cells, right? Which means that all 4 of them will stay alive, which means that this entire square is like this kind of stable thing that doesn't move. So you can end up.
What's that one that's like up and diagonal from it? That's like doing the thing.
Which one?
Yeah, the one that's up and to the right from that.
This one?
Yeah, that. What's going on there?
What is going on here? Yeah. So, well, I guess like if we were to slow it, I wish I had a control here to actually like legitimately slow it down and pause it and resume. But basically what's happening is there's like 4 cells in a row. And then the surrounding cells, like if we imagine that there's just like a strip of cells that are alive, then you would look at the cells around each one of those and apply the rules. And the way that the rules end up applied to a horizontal stick basically switches the orientation of all the cells. So
Interesting.
yeah, that wasn't an excellent explanation. Like if you were to like do the algorithm by hand, right, or
Yeah.
visualization where you went through each cell and applied it one by one. Oh, look at this one! You can see it moving across the screen.
Yeah.
It's
There's a
cute.
couple that are still moving.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting. So it
Yeah.
got absorbed by that other cluster.
Yeah. Exactly. Oh, it
Is there
looks.
an end state, or does it keep going forever?
Great question. That's actually a one of the.
Let's talk philosophy.
Yeah, I mean, well, this is kind of like computer science fundamentals too, in a way. No, you can't know ahead of time. It is I forget what the exact terminology is, but even though the game of life is deterministic, right? Given a starting state, you can predict the next state right directly afterwards, but you can't know what the final state will be. You just have to play it out, right? You have to. You can calculate what the state might be like 1,000 generations from now, but you can't know or guarantee that it will be stable or it will end at that point, unless you actually run it.
Interesting.
It's sort of interesting, yeah. I think it's similar to, or it is exactly the same thing as the halting problem, um,
Uh,
but just visualized on the screen. So yeah, you just have to play it out, which is really interesting. And that also means that the craziest part about every single time you run one of these simulations is that every single thing here can be predicted from the starting random state.
Got it. So you can predict the end, but you have not until you start it.
You can predict, you can calculate, right? It's not
Yeah,
predict.
you can know the end, not predict. You can know it for certain, depending on
Well,
the starting state.
yes, you can calculate what a particular step will look like, right? If you
Yeah,
like run it through, but you can't know if that step will be like the end of the program or something. That you
got it.
just have to let go on. Um,
Interesting.
yeah,
Okay, cool.
yeah.
That's fine.
So the point here is that all of these rules are very simple, right? So here we're just checking if the first, this is where we initialize it, right? So we're checking if the frame count, right? This is a special variable that's passed in that just tells you how many frames have passed by since the start. We just randomly initialize the cells to be alive at less than 50%. If we wanted, a quarter to be random, then I don't know if it's still updating. This might be wrong on my part. I think it's fine. Let me just make sure this is the right. Yeah. And then once we actually enter the loop to determine the state of the next step, we just grab all the living neighbors. So there's a special library that I made here that makes it easy to actually grab the neighbors data from a single cell. But we grab the live neighbors, we check the basic conditions. So if the cell is alive and it has 2 or 3 live neighbors, or if the cell isn't alive and it has exactly 3 live neighbors, then we'll set the is alive property to true. Otherwise, it'll be false. And then if it's alive, then we color it white. Otherwise, it's black. And just those things all together gives us this, which is a really interesting way to look at things.
Yeah, it's a very complex thing to be governed by such simple rules.
Yeah. Funny story actually is that like John Conway, the guy who invented it, who the late John Conway, I might say, who unfortunately passed away from COVID
No.
2 years ago. Um, he was like a really accomplished mathematician in a bunch of other ways too, and like he actually kind of hated the fact that Game of Life was his crowning achievement, because like his other work was actually more important, like at least academically. But we don't need to get into a philosophical argument about what makes something important or not. Anyway.
You love getting into a philosophical argument, though. So maybe if we have time at the end, we can just really hash it out.
Yeah, sure. Okay, cool. So this
Oh,
is working. Yeah, so I just made it blue instead of white. Make it any color we want.
make it random.
Oh, nice. Let's see. Oh, that's cool.
Oh,
Yeah. So we can actually play with parameters a bit to see like really how this affects it. So you can see I started off with only 10% of the cells being alive at random, and you can see it's a lot more sparse. Now, if we go the opposite way, like let's say 90% of them are alive at random,
oh my God.
what happened? They all died because they all fucking. Oh, sorry. No cursing on the stream. They all suffocated. They all died by overpopulation. So, if you kind of play with the parameters, you can see that there's like this, for every simulation like this, there's usually like a sweet spot for
Yeah, that's interesting.
how you want it
That's
to
cool.
go.
It does kind of look like fireworks when it's the random colors.
Yeah, no, it's fun. Here, let's speed it up a little bit. Let's go to 60 FPS. Nice.
Whoa.
Yeah, it's good. It's going for it. Okay, cool. I have a few more examples to go through, but
Let's do it. This is a good one. I like this one.
yeah. So this is the basic game of life. Just like it's a very like introductory like automaton that's usually introduced to people, but there are obviously other kinds of things that you can make. And I'm not going to go like conceptually super deep into the rest of the things that I'm going to show, but I will show this. Sorry, there's a lot of code on the screen. Just ignore me for a sec. So what I'm about to show is called Cyclic Cellular Automata. And what that means is instead of just strictly reacting to the things around you, what you see, like, oh, hey, these squares around me are dead, or like enough of them are dead, so I'm going to be alive now. Cyclic cellular automata is about this concept that every cell has like a state that it can be in. So it can be lighter, it can be darker. It's more continuous, right? And the idea is that based on the states of its neighbors, every cell will cycle through its states. So that's really abstract, but you end up with these like kind of amazing cyclical looking visualizations where
Oh, I like those. They're very soothing to look at.
yeah, they're really cool. And they simulate organic structures really well as well. Like flowers or petals, or kind of how other kinds of cyclical organisms kind of behave in real life. So hopefully this works. And here's a basic implementation of it in Replit as well, where you can see here, I'm basically representing the state of every cell as just opacity in the cell. So as you see it kind of going through, you can see these like caverns kind of emerging, right? Almost like it's a terrain map in a video game.
I like the animation of it. It's very soothing.
Yeah. Let's do red to black. Oh, that's the initial state.
Ooh.
Yeah, so some colors obviously will be a bit more high contrast, but you can play with all these different parameters. So technically, actually, there's like 16 different states that we're going through. But the reason you don't see them so explicitly is because I'm mapping the state that a particular cell is in into basically the color along the gradient between red and black. So if I made every state like a different color, you would just see things like flying all over the place. But you can see that this like affects. We can play with how adjusting how many different states you have affects the actual visualization. Whoa.
Wow.
Yeah. So based on the size, based on like how much every cell is like looking around itself, you can see how like each cell is literally cycling through, right? If you were to focus very, very closely on like, let's make the grid size a little bit smaller. So let's make this like,
So it seems like some of them aren't moving though.
yeah, some of them aren't moving. Some of them are like in a kind of stable position.
Mhm.
But if you look at any particular cell, right, it's basically just like slowly or quickly going between red and black.
Mhm.
But when you zoom out, right, you can kind of see that gradient applied across the entire thing. And it gives the illusion of movement, which is very cool.
That is cool.
Um,
Wow.
so let's bump this up to 256. Whoa.
Looks like a few things. It kind of looks like flower petals.
Mm-hmm.
It kind of looks like really sped up like mitosis or something.
Yeah. Yeah. I think like just depending on the parameters that you put in, you can get some really interesting visual results. Oh, so this one is like not even moving. The threshold is like 4.
It's too much.
It's too much threshold. Um, anyway, so
Wait, so which one was that one? Cyclic.
cyclic cellular automata. Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah. So this was invented by I forget who exactly, but I just had the Wikipedia up. David Griffith. Yeah. Um, yeah. So we can link to this in the notes, but yeah, I forget exactly how to articulately explain the rules here, but they're pretty straightforward, and it's just fun to play with.
Yeah, that's cool.
Cool. Nice. So how am I doing on time?
You have like 15 minutes.
Okay.
Does
Cool.
anyone have questions? If you have questions, pop them in the chat. We can talk about them. More cool stuff.
More cool stuff. All right. So I have something really cool to show, which is called Hyserum polycephalum. I think that's the right
Is that
pronunciation.
a bacteria or something?
It's a slime mold, actually. And the really cool part about slime mold is that it can be used not only to make really, really cool visuals like this, but to solve problems. And what do I mean by that?
Is this the thing that recently they figured out that they can get like foreign bodies out of people's bodies using like magnetic slime mold?
Maybe that's probably. I mean, it's related. I think.
I think I just saw that like this morning. Whoa, weird
Interesting.
synergy.
Yeah. Get out of here, Wired. Um, yeah. Well, I mean, on one hand, I guess that's like a very direct medical application of slime mold, and like their kind of pattern seeking abilities. But what I'm specifically talking about is the fact that slime mold in real life is like surprisingly good at solving computational problems. So,
Interesting.
so what these scientists did was basically they set up a petri dish and put little bits of agar, which was like sugar, basically, um, on the petri dish in the kind of exact shape of the Tokyo like subway system. So like every little bit of sugar on the petri dish was placed in a spot where there would be a subway station, and they let the slime mold grow. And as you can see, after 26 hours, basically the slime mold grew connections to the agar that basically matched the actual subway lines perfectly.
Wild. So it's like optimized perfectly.
Yeah, exactly. And
Wow.
um, it's following the same principles as we talked about before, right? Like any particular slime particle, right, or part of the mold itself doesn't know about the whole structure, right? It's looking around it, it's looking around itself, it's figuring out how to move, it's looking for food, and with a few simple parameters, when you apply it over the entire organism, you get really complex stuff like this, which is
That's
amazing.
very cool.
Yeah, so I was inspired last year. We're gonna take a quick trip to Twitter. There's this artist slash biologist slash, I don't know exactly what to call them, but they do really, really amazing programming and GPU stuff.
Whoa.
Um, Again, another person kind of, can you see my full screen right now?
Yeah.
Kind of these amazing artificial life simulations. I wish the resolution was higher through
It
Twitter.
actually looks pretty good.
Yeah. And this is sort of like how far you can push this stuff. So, this isn't strictly a cellular automata, right? But there's a lot of very similar techniques that are being used to create things like this, specifically this sort of agent-based perspective where you create rules around a particular agent in the system, and it behaves based on the environment around it.
That's very
Yeah. So this
that looks
person,
like my brain, like when I'm talking to someone we work with.
yeah, this is an accurate biopsy. Anyway, so this person also got like pretty well known for their work on simulating Hyserum. So this looks pretty similar to a lot of the slime mold stuff, but I went ahead and went to their website. Where is it? They had this lovely algorithmic breakdown of like how this stuff actually works. So
Oh,
here's a GIF showing sort of what happens. And the algorithm is actually quite simple. So basically, what we're looking at here is, so you see this little dot with the three things coming out of it?
uh-huh.
The dot is basically like a particle, right? It's like a kind of single cell as a part of the slime mold. And what happens is the slime mold senses, right? So this is the first step it senses. It looks around itself on the canvas or on the grid, and it tries to look for food that's been for food or for deposits that have been left by other slime mold particles before that in the previous generation. So it's sort of like sensing the existing thing, this trail that's been left behind it, and it moves in the direction of the trail. And then as it moves, it leaves behind more deposits for other cells to pick up.
Interesting.
So sort of like how a slug leaves a trail, right? As
Uh-huh.
it moves around. Imagine if you had like 1,000 slugs just like moving around on your screen, and they're all trying to like sniff out each other's slug stuff. It's
Slugs.
kind of a gross examples, but they're slug slime. So that kind of like organic behavior that we see in mold and in slugs and other sort of creatures can be simulated pretty primitively with something like this,
Interesting.
where you have
That's
like
very
basic
cool.
sensing, basic movement, a sense of location, and this kind of like deposit that you leave behind. So I re-implemented this in a REPL, and it's like my own little version of it. I got kind of some of the starter code from somewhere else. I forget exactly, but the cool part about this is that you can play with the parameters in real time as the thing is running. You can play with how each particle.
Jesse was literally asking for a 360 VR version where he could control the parameters via a GUI. And I feel like this isn't 360 VR, but It's pretty close.
It is close, yeah. So here's actually a good example because you can sort of see the
Whoa.
individual particles flying around when you slow the speed down. You see that, right?
Yeah, that is wild.
Yeah. But at a large scale, let's like get a random combination. At a large scale, kind of you see the whole structure, which is really, really interesting. And you can
This is
see,
wild.
yeah, and you can see. I also made this. Oh, there's some
Oh.
join. I made this thing where you can like when you press down with the mouse, it'll like attract over. You
Oh.
can play with it a little bit, or like break up existing structures. So you can like kind of paint with the particles, which is it's really interesting.
This feels like a brain massage. This is like ASMR visuals.
Yeah, maybe that's my future calling. I'll just start an ASMR. Um,
Generative
ASMR
art visual account.
yeah. Um, Yeah, so I spent actually a large portion of today trying to get this to work in the current example that like um, the examples that we were running with earlier, but it is very difficult to do with the current model for reasons I won't go into. But
That's okay. We can share both REPLs separately.
yeah, anyway, there's a few more things that I want to go over. So um, I haven't mentioned anything really about the GPU yet, because all this stuff we're doing is on the CPU.
Mhm.
But the reason that like the link between agent-based modeling, artificial life, cellular automata, and the GPU is that they all share this concept of programming from the concept of one thing and applying it to a bunch of things at once.
Interesting.
Um, and what that means is that, and the reason that's important is because really the only way that you can make things like this, right? Like, the examples that I was showing earlier, like, even this is like lower fidelity. It's still like pretty high resolution, but it's nowhere on the scale of this kind of stuff.
Hmm.
The only way you can really make stuff like this, especially if it's in real time, is if you program on the GPU. And what does that mean? Like, basically, the way that you write programs for the GPU is with these things called shaders. And
Yeah.
shaders are programs that are specifically meant to run on the GPU. And the reason that they're special, and the reason that they're related to what we were talking about earlier, is because a specific kind of shader, specifically the one that actually is used by your computer and your graphics card to render colors onto your screen, is that you program it from the perspective of one pixel. You write a program that
Interesting.
that defines what the color should be of a pixel, and you define the rules around, and that program is applied to every single pixel on your screen or on your canvas or whatever.
What an
Um,
interesting parallel. That's really cool.
yeah, so it's like all these concepts share a lot in common in terms of like you make one function, right, that's applied a bunch of times to the whole thing, and from that you just get these crazy visuals, you get these crazy simulations. I'm oversimplifying a lot, but
Is this how, like, do you remember when we were kids and you would like go on Windows Media Player and like there was a button you could click that would do like, or like iTunes, it would do like the visuals for the music?
yeah.
Is this how they did that stuff?
I mean, maybe. I mean, you can still make visual, right? Like if you, when I say that you have to program it on the GPU, right? Like at the end of the day, if you're seeing something on your screen, right, the GPU is processing it in some way because that's
Yeah.
what the computer uses. What I mean is like, if you want to create something that's super high performance, right, and like very smooth and real time, and like if you want to simulate like a very very large number of particles, right, or organisms, like let's say like a million at once,
Mhm.
then you need to program directly to the GPU because otherwise, if you're doing it with like a regular programming language like JavaScript, your CPU has to iterate over all of those little agents, all
Yeah.
those little sequentially, rather than the GPU being able to process them all in parallel. and produce a visual output. I think a good explanation of this is clusters, GPU versus CPU. So I have 5 minutes, so I'll link to this video another time. But basically, like, you can imagine that like painting, a painting stroke by stroke is kind of what we normally do with like CPUs. And then a GPU basically is like this cannon with a bunch of different paintball guns attached with each other at once, and then they just paint the entire picture. And
just blasts off the cannon.
Exactly. So like when you're writing a program for the GPU with a shader, you're basically writing a program that tells the computer how to do this. Just shoot out all the colors and do it all at once. Anyway.
That's cool.
Yeah. So yeah, the reason I brought that up is because like using that same technique, the thing that I'm showing on Replit is using the CPU behind the scenes, but it's the same core concept, right, that we've been talking about, where this is the old example, but let me just show some quick stuff. So where you just program from the perspective of one of these cells, right, and you create all kinds of neat visuals from that, but you don't have to think about creating the entire thing. So this is a little bit more complex, but basically it's visualizing a sine wave, and it's checking if the current cell is like above or below the actual height of the wave. And if it's above it, then it'll color in a gradient that's orange. If it's below it, it'll color in a gradient that's blue. And if it's at the top of the wave, it'll color in either randomly white or blue to sort of simulate like sea foam, which is fun.
Nice use of complementary colors on the color wheel. It's good stuff.
Thank you. Yeah. And then like one more interesting thing that you can do, again, this is a bit of a divergence from Automata in particular, but this is more about rendering techniques and how this works.
Well, is
drawing shapes. So, everything that we've been talking about has been, again, from the perspective of a single cell. But what if you actually want to draw stuff? What if you actually want to make like a circle or a square or something like that? The interesting thing about this is that you don't just like drop a circle onto the screen.
Yeah.
You have to know if, since this function is being applied to every cell in the grid, you have to know if a particular cell is inside of that shape, right?
Interesting.
So I wrote this little thing where basically, do you see this word ellipse over here?
Yeah.
So what this does is, instead of actually drawing an ellipse onto the screen like you would in like processing or something, this object, right, I called it circle, contains a function which checks if a given cell is inside of it. So if we actually look at what that looks like internally, let me show you.
Love to see those tabs in action.
Yes, live tabs. Basically, we're checking if the distance between the cells x and y and the center of the circles x and y is less than a particular radius.
Got it.
So what that means concretely, this. So this is radius with 100. So basically, we go and for every cell we check, hey, is the distance between here and the center of the circle less than the radius of the circle? If it's less than the radius, then it's inside of it, right? Because if the circle starts here and goes out to here, then any cell that is like inside of that range will be a part of the circle.
Right.
And this is what's called specifically like a signed distance function. And signed distance functions are basically used all over the place in computer graphics to actually draw all kinds of complicated shapes and create combinations of them. I know we're out of time, but just to show this concept, I have a vertical rectangle also that is similar.
Oh.
And I also have a horizontal rectangle, and this will blow people's minds, I hope. So since you're not actually drawing a shape to the screen, but you're checking if a cell is inside of the shape, you can do unique things with the shapes that you're actually declaring here, like doing Boolean operations. So if, let's say, we want to get all the cells that are inside of the horizontal strip and the vertical strip, we'll say if the horizontal rectangle contains the cell and the vertical rectangle contains the cell, what will happen? Whoa,
A little square.
a little square. If we change this to an or, what do you think we'll get?
Yeah, that.
Cross, right? And now if we get circle,
Oh yeah, put the circle in there.
we get this.
Interesting.
But now if we, you can go kind of crazy with all the different combinations of Booleans here. So
That's very cool.
okay, so here's just a regular cross again, but let's say we want to take out the cross from the circle. Instead of saying and the circle, we'll still say and, but we'll just negate the crosses. So it's taking the circle and everything except the cross. So now we get a little pi.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, we're out of time, but this was really, really interesting. We'll put the links to all of the things that we covered, all of the Wikipedia articles, all of the really intense philosophical theories. We'll throw it all in the description. And the theme for this week is exploring, and I feel like there's a lot to explore here. So thank you so much, Tyler, for joining us. And thanks, everyone, for tuning in live and watching it afterwards. This was really, really interesting.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for everybody for the patience with some of the technical difficulties. Yeah, I'll also make the REPL that I used into a template. So if you want to play with some of the simulations and learn the API that I made, you can do that too. Yeah, I'm also free to answer any questions that you might have about all of this. So you can
DM Tyler on Twitter.
You can DM me on Twitter if you want to learn more about this stuff or if you have questions about the template that I'll publish soon.
Awesome. Thank you, Tyler. We'll see everyone later. Bye.
Bye.